But what if I fail? What if I cannot make it work? Should I even try it? Seriously, like, I don't think I can do it. I'm not sure I can do it. How often do we think that? How often do these thoughts go through your mind? And honestly, I think it all the time. I worry a lot on whether I can do something or not, or if I might fail or not. But the point is not necessarily whether we think this. The question is, what do we do with those thoughts? Do we follow up on them? Do we just not do it then because we're nervous and we might not be successful? Or do we do it anyways? And we can use these thoughts, as insights maybe rather than as commands. And that is exactly what we're going to talk about today. It is about fear of failure and how we can learn to manage it. So welcome to the Healthy Underline podcast. My name is Lisa. I'm a mindset coach. I am a tapping coach as well. And in this podcast, the Healthy Underline podcast, we talk about all things mindset. We want to learn how to live the life that we dream of and become the person that actually lives that life, right? Those are the topics that I focus on here, and I love to talk about all things mindset. So here we go. Today it is about fear of failure. What is it? What is it really though? Why do we have that? Why is it such a universal experience? And what we'll do is we'll just, take apart the word, dissect it a little bit, and then see if we can operationalize it and have some really hands-on ideas of how we can learn to manage that fear of failure, to move on with our lives instead of being here paralyzed and not knowing whether we should move forward or not. Okay, so let's do it. What is fear of failure? In its most extreme form, it is called anticophobia. So that is sort of the diagnosis for someone who is really paralyzed when it comes to living life because they are so nervous, so scared, so entangled in that fear of failure. And that is sort of like the extreme version of it, but we've all experienced it, right? Fear of failure, it kind of is paralyzing. It is holding us back. It is us being nervous about not meeting expectations, of feeling short of the goals that we set out for ourselves, of making mistakes. We just don't want to do that. We're nervous about it. So we rather, stay small and not go there. And all of these things that I mentioned, so we're nervous about making mistakes, we're nervous about not meeting expectations. Those are all things that we anticipate to happen in the future. Right? It hasn't happened yet. It is a look out to the future and what could potentially go wrong. And every time when we talk about something in our mind, something mentally that is future related, where we maybe potentially overthink the future, that can lead to anxiety. So that is what anxiety is about, right? It is about anticipating future events. I don't want to really dive deep into anxiety in this episode, but fear of failure can make us really, really anxious. And anxiety is then in turn stress inducing. So fear of failure makes us really stressed, makes us really unhealthy because of it, right? We get nervous, we get flustered, we're not confident, we're not grounded, we're kind of all over the place. And that's not good. So it leads to procrastination because, I'd rather do it later because I'd rather fail later, than now. It can lead to perfectionism where we keep working on something until it is so good that there is no option of failing. And we all know that perfection is an illusion, so we'll probably never get done with it. So we get stuck in this cycle of perfecting things and not doing things, not living our lives and not having those experiences because it's not perfect just yet. I'm definitely, guilty of that. I love to get stuck in perfection and preparation to avoid doing the thing, And I said it, avoidance. Like avoidance is a big part of fear of failure as well. We just don't do it at all. So even though it might be cool, it might be fun, it might bring us further, we might suck at it. So let's just not do it at all. And it is really horrible for our confidence, because our confidence lives off us doing things, lives, or nurtures itself based on us overcoming adversity, facing challenges, and, being nervous and doing it anyways. That's what builds the confidence, our self-confidence. And by being paralyzed and crippled by this fear of failure, our confidence takes one hit after the other. So it's no good. It's not cool. But the question is why? Why do we have this fear of failure? And why is it such a universal experience? Because I don't know any person that isn't nervous about failure once in a while, And the thing is that it makes so much sense if you think about it, because the way that our world works is that we are praised for doing things right and we are punished for doing things wrong. Whether that is in the context of our families, in the context of schools, like you get, you get a good grade if you make no mistake, and you get a bad grade if you didn't, succeed, if you made mistakes, if you messed up. And that then in turn defines your future, right? Like, how are your grades? If you have good grades, maybe you get a scholarship. Maybe, you get other rewards. I remember I would get like extra pocket money if I had a good grade. I didn't get punished as much, but I got rewarded for good grades and for being good, for doing well, right? That is what gets celebrated. Sometimes people will feel that they are loved less because they didn't succeed, because maybe you got sent to your room, because you messed up. I don't know. Or people would just be colder to you because you didn't succeed. Whereas maybe if we did succeed, we got celebrated, people hug us, people are loving towards us. Maybe we get, I don't know, I'm still in the childhood memories. Maybe we get an ice cream. Maybe we get to pick what movie to watch in the evening or whatever. So we get rewarded for doing well. So it makes so much sense that this is so ingrained in our system that we want to do well and we want to avoid making mistakes. We want to avoid messing up. And we've all had these personal experiences, right? We read it in magazines, we see it on TV. It's the culture around us that celebrates success so much. It's the highlight reels on Instagram and social media. Those are the things that we like to see, and that's who we aspire to be, because that's success, right? That's how we gain status. That's how we get promoted at work. That's how we get voted into the A team. All of these things, they're based on our performance, whether we do well or whether we do not so well. And also, if we want to go there, it obviously has evolutionary roots, right? So if you are successful at existential tasks, you will survive. If you're not successful at those, you might not survive. It's very likely that you will die. Or you will lose your social position, and then you get less food, or you get less attention, or no mates, so you won't be able to procreate. Like, all of these things, they are connected with that. And now that I said it out loud, actually, yes, I was thinking about a long time ago when I said evolutionary roots, but today it's pretty much the same. The more successful you are, the more mates you get, the bigger is your paycheck. So it's still, to this day, success, it ensures our living standards. It ensures that we get to live a good life. So yeah, let's acknowledge that. Let's acknowledge that success is in our bones, and that we really want that. We really need that to be an active part in our society and live a good life. However, and here comes the messed up catch about it. If we avoid doing things because we're nervous about failing at them, so we want to ensure the success in our lives, what happens is that there are a lot of things we won't do. There are a lot of things we won't try. We will probably not experiment with many things, and we will fail less. Luckily, yay, we fail less. However, we will also not grow. We will stay small. We will kind of idle as a person. And that eventually leads to failure because we stay small and we don't allow ourselves to actually succeed in big things. And to succeed, we need to fail along the way. And that's the weird thing, right? Because to succeed, we learn. Learning comes with mistakes. Learning comes with messing up, with understanding how to not do it, with learning where we should maybe put more focus on. Because, last week when we talked about the growth mindset, I gave the example of being a strong finisher, but not such a good starter in a race, for example. So if I focus only on success, I will only focus on the finish. And I will not work on me becoming a better starter, because that would mean that I probably fail at being a good starter here and there. And by avoiding doing that, overall, I will not become a better racer, And that's the messed up thing. That's the mistake in that matrix that we have as a society, where we celebrate success and we condone failure, but at the same time, we cannot be successful without failure, So it's pretty messed up. And it has sort of this reverse effect for those people who get stuck in fear of failure, who get stuck in the paralyzing, not doing things and not trying out new things and not experimenting just because we might suck at it. So it's a problem. It's something that if you are in that category of people who fear failure, and I definitely am in it. There are things in my life I don't do because I fear that I am not good at it, so I rather not do it, right? And I know that by doing that, I actually fail at it even more, So it's messed up. So if you are like me, and if you think this is messed up and you don't want that, let's try and manage our fear of failure a bit better. And I say that carefully because I don't think that I get to remove the fear of failure altogether because of what I said earlier, because it is such an integral part of our society and of our system. And I don't know, maybe, you need to leave that system and that society and the culture and, become a monk somewhere to not fear failure. Sure, but I don't see that as a path for myself. So I need to learn how to manage it. I need to learn how to still be able to grow and have a growth mindset and allow myself to mess up and to experiment and to learn without being crippled by fear, So let's do it. Let's dissect it. And for a moment, let's remove all emotionality that is connected to it. All the things that I just said, why it makes sense to fear failure. Let's ignore it. Let's just look at it from a very sterile perspective and look at the words. So we have failure and fear. Let's start with failure. What even is failure? Failure is not meeting expectations or outcomes that we have anticipated. That is failure. Not meeting expectations or outcomes we anticipated. So an example is you expect to win the race. You can run a new personal best, but you didn't finish first. So this would be failing, right? Because your expectation of the outcome was to finish first. and you didn't, so you failed, right? It's very straightforward. It's very easy. Like, it doesn't matter how well you performed. You didn't meet your expectations, so you failed at that. And failure in and of itself is not inherently bad, right? Again, it's a mismatch between what was expected and what actually happened. That's it. A failure is a mismatch. So let's keep that in mind. Let's talk about fear. So fear is an emotion. And emotions are, in the end, neurophysical changes in our body that are triggered by something, right? And fear is triggered by the anticipation of or by the awareness of danger. So either we anticipate danger to happen, or we see danger. And that's what triggers that change in our body and triggers the fear emotion. So that's what it is, right? It's a change in our body in anticipation or awareness of danger. And emotions, in this case fear, are not commands for us. Emotions are signals. It is information, right? It is information that I anticipate danger in this case, or that I am aware of danger. And it is up to us what we do with that information. Sometimes we just let it be our master, and we just react without thinking about it. But we can just see emotions as they are and take in the information and be like, oh, there is danger somewhere. Like, let's assess that situation. How big is the risk? How urgent is it? Is it right there and I better run right now? Or is the anticipation of the danger, does that even make sense, right? So I strongly believe that it is important to not ignore our emotions, because again, it is very valuable information that might be triggered by our subconscious, by our body picking up on something, by our intuition picking up on something, and our conscious mind doesn't notice it, maybe yet, right? So I think it's an important information. So when people say ignore your emotions, ignore your fears, I completely strongly disagree with that. However, again, I believe that we get to manage our emotions, that we get to use them, analyze them, as any other piece of information that we have, and then learn from that, right? So they don't control us. Emotions don't rule our life if we don't let them. So let's put it together. Fear of failure. What is it? It's a mismatch between what is expected and what actually happened, and the anticipation of danger as a consequence of that. So the mismatch triggers the anticipation of a danger, right? It triggers that fear. And I know it sounds very sterile, but for me personally, this is so helpful to understand what is actually happening. What is happening when I fear failing. And now we can look at it a bit more from an operational perspective. What does that mean now? So, I did just say fear is an emotion, it's information, it's something we can use and we can analyze. And if we look at this particular instance, fear of failing, and we anticipate which dangers. What is the danger that we think might happen? And I cannot look into your head, so I cannot tell you what your fears actually are, what the dangers that you fear, that you're afraid of actually are. But, for me, it could be the fear that I lose my status, of my reputation will be tainted if I'm not successful at that thing, or people judge me. So it's fear of judgment. It is fear of feeling inadequate, of feeling not enough. It's in fear inside of myself, right? Maybe if you're an athlete, it could be the fear that, a very existential fear that you lose your sponsors if you don't win that race, or that you will lose your starting position, stuff like that. Those are potential dangers that we anticipate if we fail. And my suggestion in this case is that we deal with each fear individually. So a way of doing that is to really look at it and ask ourselves, okay, but how true is it? How likely is that to happen? If I don't win this race, how likely is it that my sponsors will say, bye-bye, that's it? Can I debunk it? Can I say like, well, I know a lot of other athletes who don't win every race and they have amazing sponsors, or they are, surrounded with a loyal fan base and they didn't lose their status or reputation because they didn't win this particular race or win every race or whatever it is. Ask yourself, how true is it? And is there any information that you know of that you can just draw on that will actually debunk that danger, or at least minimize it, right? Because sure, things might still happen, but most of the fears that we have, like most of the dangers that we fear, are very unlikely to happen. So really taking our time to look at them individually and see how true they actually are, how high is the likelihood of that happening, helps us to be a bit more realistic actually about it. And then in turn, it can lower the fear because it's not really that big of a danger. And since we never really looked at it, we didn't know. But now we looked at it, now we know, knowledge is probably the biggest hope when it comes to fear. Like information, knowledge, data, learning is the biggest antidote to fear. And another big antidote towards that fear and that anticipated danger is definitely tapping. Tapping is a mind-body technique that uses specific points on your body, acupoints we call them, and that kind of like activate and regulate your nervous system, and that speak with specific parts in your brain to help you reframe, replace specific beliefs that you have, specific stories that you tell yourself. And I think when it comes to reframing beliefs that lead to fear that we anticipate danger of, tapping is a super potent tool for that. I upload tapping videos every Sunday on my YouTube channel, so you can go there and see if the fear that you have identified for yourself is covered there already. If it isn't, just send me a text, send me a message, let me know, and I'd be more than happy to create a tapping video for your fear, right? To remove that fear or at least reduce that fear that you might have. Now, let's move on. Failure, expectations. But what are the expectations really? Like how realistic are your expectations? Honestly, I've been running for maybe 8 months now, but I'm far from being a marathon runner. So if I expect myself to run a marathon tomorrow, obviously it's stupid. I set myself up for failure. If I, set the goal and the expectations to run a marathon maybe next year, yeah, I can set myself up for success. I can allow myself to train for it, to, really get into a workout routine and really prime my body to do that. Will I finish it? I don't know, but I can set myself up to potentially finishing it. Whereas if I do it tomorrow, there is 100% chance that I will not finish that marathon, right? That's an obvious example, but also if you look at sometimes players or coaches, I'm thinking now of NFL teams, but also soccer teams, they might win a game and in the press conference afterwards, they're still not really happy about it because the goal that they had set, the way that they wanted to play, they didn't do it that way. They didn't win the way they wanted to win, right? Sure, they're happy they got the big W, but their expectations were differently. So they failed in their perspective, even though they didn't win. And there's also the reverse. I've seen coaches be actually very content with the performance of a team, even though they lost, even though they didn't win, right? Because they set out to do a couple of things and they did it. And they did it the way they wanted to do it. So for him, even though they lost, and sure, that sucks, it's still, a success in his or her books because yeah, they did what they set out to do. And I think that's such an important lesson to learn from these guys when we talk about expectations. Setting expectations, or goals for that matter, that are within our control change the way we see failure, right? If I decide that I need to win a race to succeed, sure, ultimate goal is to be the best maybe, or to win, or like, I get that. That makes sense. But how do you set yourself up for that? So if you use maybe stats that you work on, or specific times that you want to do, specific plays from your playbook, tactics, like specific things that will make you more likely to actually win, to get the gold medal or that first place or whatever. Those are expectations that are within your control, and you can prepare for that. You can become really good at those things and really work on that. And if you don't meet it and you quote unquote fail because you didn't run that time that you set out, to run, you can then go back, take that growth mindset that we talked about last week, and really analyze and understand how you can do better, how you can not make that mistake again, how you be upset, sure, be frustrated that it didn't work out the way you wanted, and then come out stronger the other end. And then over time, eventually, you will meet your goals, most likely. I mean, I can't give you guarantees, but it's more likely that you will succeed in whatever you wanted to succeed. Whereas when you put your expectations on some external factors that you cannot control, your success and your failure is also out of your control. So don't recommend that when we talk about how to set ourselves up for success and how we set ourselves up for failure. Because you know how you sometimes get asked in like job interviews or like those situations, like, how do you define success? And we have to be really clear on what it means for us to be successful. The same way applies for failure, I think. Like, what does it mean that we failed? What does failure look like for us? How do we define it? And the way that we do that then creates a space for us to grow, or the opposite, it creates the space or restricts the space for us to grow, and it makes us stay small. So being very mindful about this, being very intentional about this is definitely the way to go here. And we can look even at our life, at our performances, at the things that we do, and see like, where are the areas where I feel failure the most? What exactly do I fear that I will fail in? Like the entire thing, or just a specific aspect of it? And that again is then information that we can use, that we can analyze, that we can prepare for. Those are insights, right? Fear of failure is basically like, we can reframe it as a collection of different information and insights for us to use to become better. And by doing that, we reduce that fear. We redefine failure for us. So that's a win in my book. So yeah. And also, as a side note, even the best athletes on this planet, they don't win every race. It's not fair to ourselves to set these expectations, to basically setting ourselves up for failure there. So showing ourselves grace, being loving, being, I don't like the word realistic, because I want to say like, set realistic goals. I think we should set goals for ourselves that are big, that are ludicrous, that are crazy, but that are reachable. We have to stretch ourselves to get there. We have to work hard. We have to extend ourselves to get there, but it is possible. And I think that's how I see it and how I recommend to do it. Okay, I think that brings me to the end of this episode. I said what I wanted to say. I think fear of failure is such a prevalent thing, especially in, I know it from corporate life, people not, taking on opportunities, people, shying away from things they could do and try out because they might, not be good at it, and it might threaten their reputation, their career, all of these things. But it's also very prevalent in the athletic community, of course, because you don't want to be that team that loses all the time. You don't want to prepare for 4 years for this Olympic, tournament competition and then not do well, and look at all the people that have sacrificed so much for you to be there and do that, and you disappoint them by not winning, by not doing well, and those things. So it is a very prevalent thing. And again, it is definitely something that makes sense that we have. It's not surprising. I don't think it's a good thing, but it's not surprising that we have it. And it is on us to learn how to manage it and how to deal with it and how to hopefully, reduce that fear for ourselves and make sure that we don't allow those emotions to run us and to rule our lives. We're not at their mercy. It's information, it's insights. And even though in the moment it doesn't always feel this way, it's something that we can practice. It is something that we can train. It's a muscle to deal with our emotions as well. So yeah, I love talking about these things. I hope that you heard something new or something that kind of like triggered your thinking to think about things differently. If that happened, if you gained any insight, I would really love for you to rate this podcast, to give me feedback that way, because it allows me to continue doing this, and it also allows other people to find this podcast and also have those insights. I mean, you know how these algorithms work. I don't need to explain this to you. It's just a reminder that it is really helpful if you do it. And next week, we're going to talk about mental toughness. Really excited about that one. Definitely a good skill to have, no matter if you're an athlete or if you're in corporate or if you're just a person that wants to succeed in life. Mental toughness is definitely, it's a good competence. So yeah, we're going to dive deep into that next week. And until I see you again next week, I wish you a beautiful rest of your day.